Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at chapters 16, 17, and 18 in the book of Genesis. Chapter 16 is a very pivotal chapter because it is where Sarah and Abraham, looks like at Sarah's urging, decide that they're going to take this promise of a child into their own hands. And they're not willing to wait for God any longer. And so they decide, or Sarah decides, that she's going to give Abraham her handmaiden Hagar, and they will have a child, and that child will be Sarah's child, and that will be the child of promise. And that doesn't last very long. They take action on that plan. Hagar becomes pregnant, and about that time Sarah decides she doesn't like it. So there's a lot of conflict between Sarah and Hagar, and that continues on. Ultimately, a big conflict between Ishmael, Hagar's son, and Sarah's son Isaac. So anyway, very important chapter. Pay real close attention to that one. Then we get into chapter 17, and in chapter 17 we have the introduction of circumcision. And when you think about circumcision, you have to go back to chapter 15 and the cutting of covenant. God has made this covenant with Abraham, and he cut the animals in half, and he walks through the middle of it with the smoking fire pot. And that is a very Middle Eastern way of saying this is a long, firm, solid covenant I'm making with you. And so that gets carried over into chapter 17 when God says he wants to institute the covenant of circumcision. And so that is now the same type of representation between Abraham's descendants, Abraham and his descendants, and God, the same way the cutting covenant was between God and Abraham. And so that begins, and we know that even down to today, the circumcision, although it is practiced by many others, it is still a very distinctive practice in Judaism. Then when you get to chapter 18, 18 is really important because it's one of those really famous passages where three angels, we find out later that they're actually angels, but three men come up to Abraham, and Abraham's providing very normal, gracious meal for them. He's preparing this meal. They're telling him that a year from now, Sarah's going to be pregnant, and they're going to have a child, and Sarah's laughing, and they're questioning why is she laughing and all that. At the end of that, they have this discussion, and that's in verse 17. And I want to ask you, when you're reading through that section, particularly focused on 17, look and ask yourself, who's talking to who there? Because they're talking about Abraham. And think about, how's that conversation occurring and who's actually doing it? Worth thinking about. You get down to verse 25, and Abraham has started his discussion with God about, well, will you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah if there's 50, if there's 40, if there's 30, if there's 20? He asked this question in the middle there, and you see it stated in verse 25. I want to ask you, think about who actually needs to answer that question. Then you get all the way down to 10, and Abraham just stops. And he goes on about his business and doesn't say anything else. And you wonder, why 10? Why not 5? Was he okay? If there's 10, he'll save them, but if it's 9, it's okay, they can all die? I think the answer is different from he's just okay at 10. There's another question that needs to be answered, or that's included in those other verses I was asking you to look at. So anyway, take a look at those, see what you come up with. It's worth talking about sometime. Get your ideas on it. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the readings, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. Take care.